If you have a Bible this morning or want to use one of the pew Bibles in front of you or follow along on the screen, or since we, like I said, since we've got internet back, you can look it up on your smartphone. I want to go to a kind of an obscure text for this morning in the Song of Solomon. The Song of Solomon will be in chapter 8 in just a minute or two to give you time to look at it. I've often thought, I've heard people all my life talk about Mother Nature and Mother Earth, and every time I hear that, and I believe that we are to be stewards of the earth, that God has given us that responsibility. I believe in being conscious of our environment and such. So, but when I hear people talk about Mother Nature or Mother Earth, I often think, I don't know, I think Mother Earth is bipolar. You know, sometimes she's very calm and peaceful and loved to be around, and then sometimes she's kind of vengeful and mean. You know, sometimes Mother Nature's nature is not so motherly. Okay? I read a poem the other day. Lisa found it for me when I was talking with her about prepping for this sermon. Listen to the words of the poem. Whether the weather be good, or whether the weather be not, whether the weather be cold, or whether the weather be hot, whatever the weather, he weathered the weather, whether he liked it or not. Oh, whether I like it or not, the weather comes. We have no choice but to deal with whatever weather comes. In Song of Solomon, chapter 8 and verse 7, is, like I said, kind of an obscure verse to really use for this morning, but I hope that as we pull it together, it'll make sense. Solomon is writing, and he records the words, "Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised." Now, the Song of Solomon, this Old Testament book, is about the love between a husband and wife. As Solomon pens these words, he's remembering the devotion of his one true love, of his bride, of his wife, and the commitment that they had of how love will endure no matter what comes. Many scholars that I've read believe that the Song of Solomon is also an allegory, if you will, that parallels the love that Jesus has for the church. If you read the parallel in Ephesians chapter 5, it talks about how that Christ is the head of the church, and how that he gives his life a ransom for the church, and that husbands ought to love their wives in the same way that Christ loves the church. Now, as I read that passage and we hear that, we may be thinking, what does that have to do with us, you know, following the hurricane that we've just been through? Now, it speaks of many waters and of floods, but what can that possibly mean right now? Here's my point in a nutshell. I hope you listen to the rest of what I have to say, but here's the point. It's my prayer this morning is we allow these words of love to comfort us in every storm of our life, both spiritual and the kind that we just faced with the hurricane, the physical storms as well. I want you to hear and hide in your heart two important truths that come from this passage this morning. Truths that Solomon is relaying to us from the very heart of God, the very heart of the love of God. The emphasis in this verse, and for us to hear this morning, is the value of love. God's enduring love in the eye of every storm. This year, our primary focus for this year has been on discovering ways to implement the idea of just be there. You've seen on the wall that we've posted, this kind of follows each year that Lisa and I have served as your pastor. The first year we emphasized and thought and prayed through our core values of teach God's word, transforming lives, and building the kingdom, building God's kingdom. That's why we exist. Then we talked about a new way of thinking, a new way to understand and define success, a new way of thinking about how we do church and who we are as followers of Jesus. And then the challenge to think outside the walls, to go beyond just us, but to go to a community that is hurting and needs to know the love that we've experienced and we've found. And then for this year, we've been focusing on just be there. Just be there. And what that means is that we are not using a variety of programs or gimmicks to try to get people to come to church or to convince people that they need to become followers of Jesus. Just be there means that we build relationships with people, both the people of the church inside the walls and especially building relationships with people outside the walls. And then simply just being there with them in both the good times and the bad. If we heard a theme from the 6 testimonies we heard this morning, that theme was of people being there for one another. Amen. Just be there is a living example of how a real, authentic, devoted follower of Jesus responds to everyday life. And then being ready, as Peter says in 1 Peter 3:15, be always ready to give an answer of the reason for the hope that you have. Because when people see a genuine, authentic follower of Jesus, they will have questions. Maybe not the first week that you know them, maybe not the first month, but after you build relationship with them and they feel free to question and to ask, they will ask questions. And I believe that at the right moment, God will draw them to Himself. They will open their heart to God's enduring love in the eye of their storms and begin to follow Jesus. Before the hurricane, during the hurricane, and since, I have witnessed wonderful examples in the life of our church and in our community of people just being there. Of that idea, that concept being lived out. And as I said, you've heard some of it in the testimonies this morning. Just be there is built on the premise of relationships anchored in love. God's love for us, our love for Him, and our love then for one another. Just be there is our way of implementing Jesus' commands when He explained to the man, when he asked him, what's the most important, what's the greatest commandment of all? Remember, Jesus answered in Matthew 22, He said, the man asked, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law? And He, Jesus, said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. So Jesus summarizes the entire Old Testament teaching in 2 lines. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. In Luke's gospel, he adds strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. In the text that my attention has been drawn to this week, Solomon writes down the words that are spoken by his one true devoted love. Words about the kind of love that lasts before, during, and after the storms. When many waters and floods attempt to drown it out. She speaks of a love that is unquenchable and beyond value. The two emphases of this verse, the unquenchable love. I'm sure we've all seen them. Sometimes I've had them used on me a time or two. You've seen those candles on a birthday cake. That when the person who's celebrating the birthday cake, we sing happy birthday and they blow out the candles and the candles come right back on. They reignite. And no matter how hard that person blows on the candles, they're not going to blow them out. That's the idea behind the words of this particular text. The unquenchable love expressed in these thoughts are like those candles. No amount of wind is going to quench the flames. And this thinking is taken to an extreme in the song where the woman of Solomon's dream tells him her love could never be quenched, drowned, or flooded out. She describes a dedicated love that's passion, power, and flame will never, ever die. And she talks about a love that is beyond value. This description takes our thoughts in another direction, but makes the same point. This line, when she speaks about if a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. It speaks of the one who would devalue this kind of everlasting love. She says, in other words, if all the household wealth, all the wealth in the world cannot fathom the value of such a strong, unquenchable love. She makes a very bold statement. She's saying that the person who places a price, an earthly price, on this kind of love, that person would be utterly despised. I like the verbiage that's used here. It's not, I'll think less of him. I might not like him very much. I mean, she gets, don't hold back. Tell us what you really think. He would be utterly despised for trying to put a value on that kind of love. And this is the love that God has for us. God's love surrounds us in the eye of the storm. Several of you of the testimonies talked about the peace of the storm. I want to identify with that. I want to say that I understand that when the first waves of the storm began to hit, and I began to feel stressful, and I began to, kind of, what's going to happen? I laid my head down, and I slept. I slept in peace until the eye of the storm had passed. And I woke up and I looked around at those gathered in the house with us and I said, hey, it's good to see you all. A peace that passes all earthly understanding. And that's because of the love that God has for us. The love described by Solomon's love. A love unquenchable despite the magnitude of the storm, the floods, the hurricanes, despite the emotional toil exacted because of the stress of the anxiety and the fear of the storms. His love surrounds us. And for His surrounding love, we gather this morning to give Him praise and honor and glory in the house of the Lord.
Amen. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
Amen. Jesus, when He died on the cross, He showed us, He demonstrated for us what this kind of love looks like and how it works. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's what God's love looks like, and that's how it works. Jesus just being there for the redemption of all mankind. Now, Hurricane Irma has opened a door for us, for you and me to even more aggressively live out our call of God to just be there. To be there with the love of God. A love unquenchable and beyond earthly value. A commitment to just be there with relationships anchored in love is more than just a slogan for us now. It's more than just a sign that we'll post and talk about. See, we have seen it in action. We have seen literally what it looks like to just be there and how just be there works. Because of the example Jesus gave, we follow His example for one another and for everyone with whom we touch outside the walls of our church. The song that we played on video talks about this same kind of love that Solomon talked about. The Eye of the Storm, written by a man named Ryan Stevenson. Ryan Stevenson, before he became a contemporary music artist, spent 8 years as a paramedic. Speaking about the song, Stevenson said, a lot of this song is about my heart going through the ringer. One of the things I've seen as a paramedic is we all have true, real struggles, ugly parts of our lives that we are dealing with, and failures and defeats. In the middle of that, when we feel our sails are ripped out in the battles and wars we're going through, we can feel like we float out to sea where the Lord isn't paying attention to us and He has overlooked us. But He says, catch this, He says, I want this song to say no to that thinking. His promise to us is He is the anchor of our being, and He is our only hope. Jesus came to be there for you and for me, and we are called to follow Jesus' example, to just be there too in the eye of the storm. I want us to read again the words to the chorus of that song, and then we're going to play it again. And I want us to sing together the chorus. This is our closing song, if you will. If you sense the Spirit of the Lord in this room calling you to prayer, as I've always said, God hears you. He is here in this room, and He hears you right where you are. But sometimes we sense that need to respond to an altar of prayer. If you want to pray this morning, to give Him thanks for being with you in the eye of the storm. Maybe you want to pray this morning that God will equip you more to just be there for others, for your neighbors and for your family and for your friends. Maybe you just want to have a closer relationship in that love, that unquenchable, beyond value love of Jesus this morning. Hi, this is Pastor Don from Waters Edge Church here in Cape Coral, Florida. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel to
listen in to our Sunday morning preaching services. If you want more information about us, I invite you to check out our webpage at mywatersedgechurch.com, or you can check our Facebook page. Just search for Waters Edge Church, Cape Coral, Florida. Or better yet, I would love to meet you in person. We gather every Sunday morning at 10:30 for a time of inspirational worship and biblically based preaching. We would love to meet you, and we've got a seat here reserved just for you. Hope to see you soon. God bless.